welcome to the Mindful Mixer podcast. This is Francesco Portoso.
And I'm Janina Loureiro. We're part of the organizing team behind Mindful Mixer, a project that started in Luxembourg and brings people together for in-person events to explore meaningful topics that shape our lives, yet often go unspoken in everyday conversations.
We believe that making time to reflect can lead to greater self-awareness and understanding, and ultimately to personal and collective growth.
This podcast carries the spirit of Mindful Mixer beyond the events, offering thought-provoking discussions for anyone seeking reflection and fresh perspectives.
So, join us as we explore ideas that matter, challenge assumptions, and open space for deeper, more mindful conversations.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mindful Mixer. Today we're talking about our last event, which was on belonging and community. Why did we pick this topic, Francesco?
One reason we picked it's really because we felt the importance of community to feel fulfilled in life, and we found out actually also to possibly live longer. We found some studies that highlighted that the importance of strong social relationship towards the goal of improving longevity, and we can maybe talk about it later.
Yeah, we found that there was almost like a primal need for humans to connect and to be in community. So we evolved as social animals. So it just being in a group was kind of like increasing our survival odds. So in general, like we are always wired to seek out connection.
Yeah, this is let's say, I don't want to call it an issue, but often the way we evolved thousands of years ago reflects sometimes in a negative way because our society changed, and now our brains are still wired in the same way of thousands of years ago. So we need to kind of keep this in mind.
Definitely. I guess it's not as easy to do it nowadays, right? Like, how do you see it?
Well, we asked this question during the session just to get a sense of how often do people that were in our event sensing a strong sense of belonging in their daily life. And I remember that more than half at least answered that they either, didn't feel much sense of belonging or just sometimes or rarely. And I think this highlights how important it's to talk about this topic given the potential strong consequence that it can have.
Yeah, definitely. Shall we navigate a bit into what was the content of this event?
Yeah, let's go through it. We started by discussing why we think the belonging is important and what specifically does belonging mean to us.
What did you find were the discussions like in your group?
I think getting back to what we just mentioned, this question related to, this topic of being an evolutionary trait, we highlighted that even though before it was really more like something that it's needed for us to survive, now it's just much more at a philosophical level because we don't need to be part of a group to survive. We get our salary, we can go and buy groceries. We don't need to get support from other people to fight an animal, to not starve. That's definitely like a completely different level.
There's a less obvious link to survival, let's say, like in terms of physical needs.
Absolutely. However, we don't feel fulfilled, apparently, if we don't have any sense of belonging. And one trait that I remember in our conversation stood out was this idea of feeling a sense of trust towards the members of the community.
What does it mean exactly, trust?
Well, I was asking myself this while we were speaking, and I remember that discussing that even if you don't necessarily know all the people very well, we thought about like a bike group, for instance. If you are going cycling together, you don't necessarily need to know maybe what is the job of the others who are cycling with you. It's still important that you trust them, that they will signal you if a car is about to overtake your group.
Something happens, yes.
Yeah, so to kind of trust them that, let's say in the context of this community.
It's interesting how it links back to survival in a way.
Good point, yeah.
But yeah, it's this sense of belonging. We also kind of delved into how it evolved over time. And there we also had a lot of different views. I remember in my group, we had this almost like a duality of like how we interacted with our own community. So I remember that there was this idea of, you know, in each community that a person is, they try to foster a deep connection. And that's like their, you know, their way about connecting with communities. Whereas there was also a contradicting approach, which was more having communities for different purposes, and in one community maybe being a bit more profound and exchanging more deeply, where others are kept more a bit on a surface level.
Was this something related to maybe each person's behavior, somebody feeling more introvert or more extrovert?
Definitely. I think that point really shapes the way we connect with the world. I think definitely there is more a need for profound connection on the introvert spectrum, and the more you go towards ambivert and like extrovert, then it becomes... I think extroverts can also have very deep connections, but it's true that they are more likely to engage superficially in different groups because of their extrovert nature, for sure.
Okay, and do you think that for some people, community could be actually, let's say, a mean to get to know people better? Or, you know, it sounds like a bit of the question, or is it, does it come first, the
chicken or the egg? Yes.
But yeah, like at least from your conversation, did you find that some people were maybe seeing, let's say, oh, I will join a community so that I can get to know more certain people that I would like to get to know, or the other way around?
No, definitely. I think it can work both ways, right? Like we can have the intention of joining a community as a way to create connection and build friendships. But the opposite can also be true. You can have a deep connection that already exists, and through that connection, you enter communities beyond this first connection that you had.
Right.
How was it for you? Like, how did you kind of exchange on this question?
There was an interesting point made by one person in my group that was interesting because he was mentioning that for him in a situation, the sense of belonging came because the other people that he was in touch with also didn't find a sense of belonging. And let's say being outliers together created a sense of belonging. So it sounds like a play of words, but not having sense of belonging gave them sense of belonging. And that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of having the idea of a shared experience. So they are sharing this sense of not belonging. So that kind of creates a connection.
Right.
Because you can see yourself reflected in the other person.
Yes, eventually having some common traits can, again, give this sense of belonging. And we were reflecting on which are these common traits. Let's say, how can we define belonging with a minimal set of factors or ideas that can provide sense of belonging to someone? This was actually answering one of the questions that we had at the beginning to everyone who was participating, which was, what do you think makes a community feel truly meaningful? And in our discussion, we got to the answer that a shared purpose or a shared set of values or shared experience are enough. So one of these is enough. And it's interesting because if you remember, we had the majority of people answering in a certain way, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
So most of the people were mentioning that they believe that it's very important to have both personal connection and also a shared purpose to feel a sense of belonging. But we had a discussion when we were preparing the question. We didn't really agree, right?
True. Yeah. I think here we had a very particular sense that for us, purpose alone was sufficient to make a community feel meaningful.
Yeah, and I had a good example for my personal experience, and there was a similar example shared by other people in our group, that where basically a group of strangers can be connected by being part of the same let's say, community. For instance, in my case, being part of the same student association in the past helped me to feel connected to any member of this association whenever I met him or her around Europe, around the world. And just this feeling of, I know that you went through similar experiences I had. I know you're having certain perspective on the world and being maybe open-minded on some aspects as I learned to be, thanks to maybe traveling and so on. And just having this understanding that we share these, again, as I mentioned earlier, experiences, values, and purpose was really making me feel connected to the person. And somebody else shared similar example for like MBA alumni association. So this basically put us a bit like against what most of the people answered, but I think also for us it was important to reflect about it, to actually get to this answer, because at first sight it might sound easier to answer. Yeah, for a community you need to be both connected to the person at a very intimate level and share maybe a purpose. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that in a first instance, when a person thinks about what makes a community feel meaningful, they might say that a deep connection and a purpose is needed. But upon reflecting on it, we kind of came to a conclusion as a group that actually having a shared purpose is enough.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Having a shared purpose, or maybe not even just a purpose, we mentioned earlier also like sharing experiences. You can think about maybe you have a group of friends that you haven't been seeing recently. So it's possible that you maybe change also like values, or, let's say you don't have a specific purpose, but just a simple fact that together you went through a lot of experiences, maybe while growing up, or you did something very meaningful together in the past, now still connects you and give you a sense of belonging.
Yeah, it's almost like a shared identity, and that kind of ties up with an exchange I had as well, which was the role of art and this idea of shared passion for art. So in our group there was someone working in arts, and it was a very interesting perspective to have, because most people obviously they have their own communities about interests, about family, work, but this person, they are constantly creating communities for their work. So if they have to work in a play, in a very short term, they need to create this bonding experience so that everything works perfectly, so that in the performance of the play, everything just shows in the best way possible. And I think that makes that person have to be really intentional about the way that they create connection. And it was just interesting to hear about, how it's a very short-lived experience of community, but also a very intense and strong one. And there was even a mention that after this, once the performance is done and each person goes their way, sometimes they even stay in touch because there was such a connection through the experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's interesting. We didn't really think about this. So I like this concept of, yes, you can have a community, even though, let's say, it's going to fulfill its goal. Mm-hmm. And let's say it might end. However, you can still be in touch and have, let's say, a community which is not anymore connected because of the shared goal, because you achieved the goal, but because of the fact that you share this experience together. And maybe we can say it's bittersweet,
Yes, definitely. That was the feeling that it was transmitted.
Okay. One interesting reflection we had also related to this was we were discussing about the fact that, in a community, it's very easy to quickly get in touch also with strangers maybe. And this can happen also for people that are maybe part of religions or political parties, that you instantly get to feel like that you are connected because you have this shared purpose. So I had this question that came to my mind, and it was about understanding if this sense of belonging would be the same if, let's say, in a utopistic case, everybody in the world would be part of the same community. So basically, does the fact that there is some kind of exclusivity in the community, the fact that there is this, it sounds a bit bad, but this kind of sense of us maybe
Privilege,
versus
yes.
like we are us versus others, or even if you're not in a competition with somebody else, but the fact that I know I'm part of a limited set of people, is this necessary to
That's a very interesting thought.
to give sense of belonging?
I don't think that's something that comes to the surface right away when you think of community, but it's true that a lot of things, a lot of communities nowadays is a bit like that. Like, and I think that the examples that you gave, like, they are quite good, right? Like, who would want to be, like, if everyone was part of the same football team?
Yeah, I think football, it's probably one of the best example, or any kind of sport, because it's a zero-sum game. So and you have to compete with each other. So the fact that if one wins, the other loses, and vice versa, there is competition. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense that people are all part of the same team, and this it's really different if let's say there is a shared purpose that it's not a zero sum. So basically, if you think about like the example I was mentioning earlier, like a student association, where the more the merrier, the more people that can cooperate for a certain purpose, the better. Then I don't see drawbacks of having more and more people. So this sense of exclusivity, it's not, at least
it's not as pronounced.
It's not as pronounced, and it's not required. And often it's the opposite. The more people that support a cause that maybe you believe in, like try to think about maybe the concept of sustainability. I don't know. You have a sustainability. Maybe it's a very important cause for you, and for you, it's just better that more people share this purpose and start maybe following certain behaviors that can help towards this goal of being more sustainable.
Yeah, here we start kind of going into, I think, just in general questioning the different types of communities, and just in general, like across time, we've had way too different communities. I think that we both discussed a lot on this idea that religion is the utmost example of that.
Yes, at least it's probably one of the longest lasting example. Yeah.
And I would say most expansive, in the sense that it really covers most of the population on Earth across so many years. And
it's famous to provide purpose to people, right? It's one of the most famous, let's say, idea that people use to find purpose as well.
And we were curious, so taking this kind of examples that we kind of exchanged on, how can we nurture nowadays more secular and inclusive communities where people feel deeply connected, but no matter what they believe in? Yeah,
so basically, if we want to create inclusive communities where it doesn't really matter if you are religious or not, it's not part of the equation, let's say, how can we maybe change certain habits or traditions so that everyone can feel included no matter what they believe?
Yes, on this, we had a really interesting thought on our group, which is a kind of linked to an experience that we have here in Luxembourg. And it was concerning the Christmas markets and how they sort of rebranded, this idea of Christmas, and they called it Winter Lights Festival to address any kind of festivity and Christmas markets that we see around. So there's not an inherent link to religion. And I do think that it does make for a more inclusive celebration.
I think that's a very good example. Like, if you think about it, everybody likes lights and food and
the winter feeling.
Yeah, especially like, in our region where winter is quite cold and weather is not the best, and everybody looks forward the Christmas celebration, not because of the religious aspect, but because of the lights, the music, the festive spirit, the positive vibe, the possibility of gathering with others and spending a nice time together. I think that's a perfect example. Yeah.
And a balancing perspective. So there might be also people that really want to participate from the religion point of view. Yeah, both of these people who have diverging opinions, they can come together and celebrate, and that's really what we were aiming for with this question.
Yeah, it would be a good exercise, like, to try to think about how we can, I don't want to say replace, but how can we see certain maybe traditions or events, environments from a slightly different perspective so that we can actually be more inclusive. It's interesting to keep in mind and see where it can be applied or not.
Yeah, here I think we're kind of going towards the last point of discussion that we had, which is...
We always try to leave with a call to action, and
True.
The call to action this time was like, what can each of us do to build a more intentional sense of belonging, right? I think it was a shared understanding among all the people that participated that each of us has to contribute, right? And not be just passive. Did you have any interesting reflection in your group?
I would call it more an observation, but it came after the event. So when we were discussing with the wider group, and I just noticed that there was this intentionality from people to voice positive thoughts. So whether it was, towards other participants, I saw it happen where there was this celebration between people that even didn't share the same group, but they were just celebrating the way that they spoke after, and as well towards us, people voicing their gratefulness for organizing the event. And it really stuck with me that someone said, it's important that we say these things, it's important that we voice this gratitude. And I think for me personally, this really goes hand in hand with the idea of community, because it's when we express our most positive and authentic thoughts that we can create connections with others. Because usually it's the opposite that happens in this world, right? Yeah. People voicing diverging opinions and criticisms, and that causes division, and so not belonging.
Absolutely. And, sharing the fact that people are willing to share their experiences, which, it's easy for others to kind of understand why a person is feeling in a certain way if is able to understand the story behind it, right? That's often, I think, one way to be able to understand each other is to really listen more carefully and put ourselves in the other shoes. It's not easy, but, the more you listen, the more you can really understand why a person is having certain thoughts, even if they are quite different and maybe opposite from the one you have. But this point you mentioned about, even just focusing on, being vocal and grateful to each other, to recognize, when somebody maybe is sharing interesting thoughts and, providing some important reflection can just make that person feel, I'm valued by the people around me.
Yes.
I'm feeling, like the person can feel recognition for what he or she is sharing, and encourages, I guess, the person to keep being open and not shy, to be more authentic, which is also another trait that I remember we often heard during this session as a important trait for feeling sense of belonging.
Yeah, it's a cycle, right? In the same way that negativity can be a cycle, positivity can also generate more positivity and generate more connection. And I like the point that you mentioned, that it's difficult to do, but the more we do it, it's really like a skill, right? And I think if we have to finish this episode in one note, is why is it important to develop this skill, to be intentional about community?
Yeah, I think getting back to these studies we mentioned at the beginning, we will put the links in the show notes, but it seems that loneliness and social isolation are linked to a number of, increase in heart disease and immune dysfunction, anxiety, depression, but specifically it seems that there is a 30% increase in earlier death, which
a lot.
Yeah, you can compare it to many other, popular
risk factors.
Maybe, some accidents or smoking, something like that. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of stress on this maybe call to action that we can open to everyone who would listen to this episode to think about something that each of us can do to be active and not just, passively waiting for feeling sense of belonging, but try to...
Like coming to a Mindful Mixer event, for example.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for listening this session.
Yes, see you.
Thanks, guys.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Mindful Mixer. Thanks so much for tuning in.
If you enjoyed the conversation, you can support the project by sharing it with a friend who might find it interesting, and you can follow us on social media for updates on new episodes and events. Mindful Mixer is on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But the best way to stay up to date with our events is to subscribe to our mailing list. Just check the links in the show notes. There, you'll also find any references to materials we might have mentioned during the session. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.